Chris Andre here, let's talk boxing. It's been a very, very dark day for the sport, and I'm not talking about the postponement of Fury and Oleksandr Usyk. That's not a big deal, really. In the grand scheme of things, that's a delay, it's disappointing. What is a truly tragic development is the news that Kazuki Yamaguchi, the 23-year-old Japanese fighter who last fought on the Naoya Inoue undercard against Seiya Tsutsumi, has passed away, having succumbed to his injuries in that fight. He was a hugely talented fighter. And then to see him start to struggle a few minutes after the fight, it was a very concerning thing indeed. And it's the sort of thing that makes you conflicted about your love for this sport. And don't get me wrong, before I start getting all the comments criticizing me for saying this, I understand that the net benefit of boxing existing in a professional format is probably much greater than if boxing was to not exist or be banned. So I do understand that. But it's still difficult as a fight fan to not feel as though you're somehow complicit. To think about his family and what they're going through today, it's just a horrendous thing. So I don't know what to say. May God rest his soul. May he give the family strength. It's just a horrendous situation all round for a 23-year-old that had his whole life ahead of him. I also want to send my condolences to the Weathers family. Carl Weathers, the man that starred as Apollo Creed, along with Sylvester Stallone, who inspired more generations of kids to take up boxing, perhaps, than even any great fighter has. He has passed away at the age of 76 years old. So a real loss to the sport from a cultural perspective as well. A dark day all round. Now, in terms of the reason you guys are here, I'm sure it is to discuss Tyson Fury pulling out of the fight against Oleksandr Usyk, having sustained a cut. Now, there were a lot of people that were saying Tyson Fury is going to pull out. Trust me, he's not going to go ahead with this fight. He's going to find an excuse. And because of those accusations, you couldn't rule it out when it first happened. Now, I wasn't coming out and taking a position at all. I decided I was going to wait a bit. I know a lot of people were rushing to break the story, trying to be first. And I understand that. It's such a saturated market having a boxing channel. But I wanted to wait. I wanted to see what would emerge in terms of news and try to give you a fair analysis driven by critical thinking to try and figure out what it is that has taken place here. Has this been orchestrated by Tyson Fury? Is it all fake? Or is this genuine? And are we going to get to see the fight down the line? What happens now with Oleksandr Usyk? We're going to discuss all of that. So what I'm going to do is actually consider the various accusations that have been thrown at Tyson Fury. And this is always difficult to do as a content creator, because unless you're criticizing Tyson Fury 100% of the time, 100% of the way, you will be getting called a fanboy. There is no fighter, or very few, maybe top 3 or 4 fighters that I've ever covered that trigger an emotive response as much as Tyson Fury. It's crazy to me. You can be critical and you can be praising, and people will just focus on any praise that you give him unless you're on his case all the time. It's mad to me. But that's not what we're going to do. We're not going to succumb to the pressure. We're going to try and analyze this fairly. And the first accusation that was coming out was, where's the footage and the pic of the cut? I don't see anything coming up here. I don't believe it. It's got to be fake. Well, the cut did emerge as a photograph. It was put out by Queensbury, and you can see it's quite a deep cut, and he would not be able to fight with this cut. It's underneath the eyebrow. It's on the thin part of the skin of the eyelid. Very, very difficult for that to heal. Blood would be rushing into the eyes during the fight. If it gets any deeper with any individual shot, it could end up leading to the fight being stopped, even though some people seem to be making out like it's a nick. It's not a nick. Now, we also saw footage of the actual shot itself, and it seems to be an elbow from his sparring partner on the inside. A lot of people have been critical of the sparring partner. Some people are saying it's Smakichi, the Croatians. I initially thought it was Alexis Barriere. Whoever it is, you can't criticize the dude. They're engaging in a spar. Tyson Fury has tried to use head control with his left hand, so he's moving him and affecting his construct. He's tried to throw a left hook, in my opinion. He's caught him with an elbow. I know some Fury fans seem to be frustrated here. You can't attack this guy for it. Arms are flailing. People get caught with elbows and forearms all the time in boxing. Even when people think that it's intentional, it's not necessarily intentional. Now, the second accusation is, why wasn't Fury wearing headgear? Well, he was wearing headgear, as you saw in that footage. So let's talk about the different types of headgear. The first picture that you can see there on the top left, that's called an open face headgear. This provides the least amount of protection. It doesn't offer much protection apart from to the head, to be honest with you. The one just to the bottom right of it, where you can see an indentation coming from the side and covers the chin, that one is called a full face protector. The one to the right of that, the light blue one, that's called a cheek protector. The difference between the two, because they're very similar, is that the full face protector offers a strap across the chin. And to the bottom right, that's the one that's considered to offer the most protection by most people. That's considered a bar face head guard. Now, a bar face head guard, as you can see, covers the tip of the nose as well. Not the bridge of the nose, but the tip. So because the boxing glove is big, squeezing the whole hand through that area to catch him on the bridge of the nose is going to be difficult. So what was Tyson Fury wearing? He seems to have been wearing a cheek protector. there's no strap at the bottom protecting the chin. There's also no bar across here. And a lot of people are sitting there saying, well, it's irresponsible of Fury to wear this because it increases the chances of getting caught with a serious shot and then putting you out of action for the main event. The truth is, there isn't much of a difference in the area that was actually caught in terms of the damage being done. He wasn't caught on the nose. He wasn't caught on the chin. He was caught on the eyelid. And you can see the spacing between those areas. There isn't much of a difference there. The reason that this occurred is simply a freak accident. The tip of an elbow is sharp. You can squeeze it through those little sections. You're not expected to do that with a glove on either one of these face protectors. It's almost like King Henry II of France. This guy died in a jousting contest because the joust went through that small slit in his helmet. You can see he's covered everywhere. He's wearing a neck protector full of body armor covered, and it just slipped in through there. It's a freak accident. And the same sort of thing has happened, unfortunately, with Tyson Fury. It is what it is, guys. Accusation number 3. Nobody spars 2 weeks before a fight. This is nonsense. It's not uncommon for it to be 2 weeks out from a fight. Enzo Maccarinelli, a former world champion, has confirmed this. Accusation number 4. He cut himself by blading as they do in pro wrestling. The argument here is that because Tyson Fury was looking for a way out, he took a razor blade and he cut himself. And there is a history of this in professional wrestling. However, you have to consider the position of the cut. As I said, this is hugely problematic as a cut from the previous cut with Otto Wallin. And so when you're cutting an area that used to be a wound, you're actually causing more damage and you can cause long-term problems. There are fighters whose entire careers are ruined by these sorts of cuts because they can't get it sorted. Mike Katsidis was an example of a fighter who used to bleed profusely because he had consistent cuts underneath his thin eyelids. And no matter what they tried to do to rectify it, he would always open up. Whereas when you're talking about WWE cuts and blading, if you notice, the cuts tend to be higher up. They tend to be on the forehead. They are above the eyebrow. They are not underneath the eyebrow. You can stitch that section up and the skin can still be thick. It can still be dense. It's not like the eyelid. And if you look at fighters even after the fact, years after they've retired, these pro wrestling athletes, look at their foreheads. That's where the scarring is. It's not on the eyelids. It's the foreheads where they cut themselves. And you can see it here as well, where people talk about the contemporary history of blading. It's specifically mentioned as the forehead. And even then it's considered risky because you can potentially slice an artery on your forehead, as Eddie Guerrero did back in 2004. So the idea that Tyson Fury purposely sliced his own eyelid, potentially causing long-term permanent damage, I find to be a bit of a reach. If you want to go down that route, okay. But it would have been far easier to blame a shoulder injury, right? And pay some private doctor to give you some sort of exemption note. I don't think he'd go to this extent to do that. Which brings us on to accusation number 5, and that Tyson Fury has a long history of always pulling out of fights. Well, let's analyze this. But before we get into him pulling out, let's talk about the hypocrisy of Tyson Fury. If your criticism is that Tyson Fury is a hypocrite, then I'm not going to challenge you on that. But that's a very different argument to say he purposely cut himself to pull out of the fight. Let's go back to 2013, over a decade ago, when he was due to fight David Haye. And the fight against Tyson Fury was postponed because David Haye pulled out of the fight with a cut just above his eyebrow. Tyson Fury would then say on Twitter, and I quote, "The cut is genuine. Correct. You can't box with the cut. Correct. It has to be cancelled. That's why he's cut, so he can pull out." In other words, Tyson Fury is implying here that David Haye, out of fear of facing him, purposely cut himself. So now that people are making this accusation against Fury himself, how can you really complain? He can't. But being consistent as I am, and not just a guy who's going to be emotional and unfair in my analysis, in the same way that I disagreed with Fury back then and said that it didn't make sense, I didn't buy that David Haye would do that, is the same reason that I don't believe that Tyson Fury did it now. Now, for those of you that will try and imply that I'm some sort of Tyson Fury fanboy because this is so predictable now, it's dull, to be honest with you, I will say this. Tyson Fury had accused David Haye of being ready to pull out. And after that cut, he said, "You see, I told you so," just like a lot of people are now saying about Tyson Fury. Well, David Haye would then go on, after the fight was rescheduled, to retire from boxing the first time because he had a shoulder injury that needed surgery and he would not be able to fight on. And again, I was defending David Haye. You're not just going to make up that you need shoulder surgery and go through the surgery to get out of the fight. The point is, at this stage, Tyson Fury, as far as we know, is only talking about postponement and rescheduling. He wants to go ahead with the fight. And there's been a cut man that's come out that said, listen, this type of injury, typically it would take 3 months, so we're not going to get this fight until the summer. regardless of if it's postponed, he still wants the fight. David Haye didn't take that fight at all. And I was still saying Tyson Fury was wrong back then. And if you actually look at the types of cuts, Fury's is a lot worse than David Haye's was. Like I said, above the eyebrow, it's easier to stitch up and have less long-term damage. In other words, if you wanted to cut yourself, it's still a bit low there from David Haye, just above the eyebrow. But if you wanted to do that and take such an extreme measure, you're a lot more likely to do it above the eyebrow than below. So again, me backing David Haye in that argument shows that by backing Tyson Fury, I'm just being consistent. So let's talk about other actual pullouts. Well, for a pullout to be worthy of criticism, the reasoning behind it has to be unreasonable. So one of the first times I remember him pulling out, and if there's any that I've missed out, please let me know in the comment section down below, because I'm doing this off the top of my head. It's not easy to remember every aspect of a guy's career that's been going for 16 years, right? But the first one I remember is Oleksandr Usyk. You see, what had happened there is that Tyson Fury was due to fight Derek Chisora, and it was Derek Chisora that pulled out with an injury. And as a late replacement, Usyk stepped in. And Fury was due to fight him before his uncle Huey was taken ill, seriously ill in hospital. Now, bear in mind, Fury's trainer at the time was his uncle Peter. So you're talking about the brother of Peter and the uncle of Tyson. And they said that we can't go on with this, we're not in the right frame of mind. And it was genuinely serious because tragically, Huey Fury, who I believe was in his 50s at the time, he wasn't an old man at all, passed away from his health situation. So it was a tragic moment in the Fury household. You're not going to hold that against Tyson Fury. When Filip Hrgović fought Zhilei Zhang, and he didn't look himself, there were a number of people saying his dad passed away not that long ago, he never should have gone ahead with this fight. Well, when a fighter then doesn't go ahead with the fight, you can't criticize him. You can't have it both ways. But there has also been a situation where Tyson Fury did pull out citing an injury. And that was when he was going to fight Vladimir Klitschko in the rematch. He said that he was running in the Lake District and he went over his ankle and it caused for him to be injured. There were some people at the time who felt that it might have been a tit for tat thing, because in the first fight, Vladimir Klitschko had postponed the fight and Tyson Fury had accused him of mind games. So some people felt that he was doing the same in return. But when the fight was rescheduled, Fury would eventually pull out for a second time and the fight was called off. And we didn't see Tyson Fury in the ring again for another 3 years. He was declared medically unfit to fight. Now, a lot of people feel that that was a cover-up for the fact that he'd failed a test. Other people were talking about the fact that he had completely gone off the rails. We'd seen how overweight he was. There was talk of him abusing various substances, abusing his body. Whichever way you cut it, he clearly had a mental health crisis. And I know a lot of people accused Fury of using mental health as a grift. But regardless of where you stand on all of that, even if you're a cynical person, there's no doubt by looking at him at the time, there's no way a professional athlete can get into that sort of state over the following few years and for him to have been right mentally. Clearly, something was going on with Tyson Fury. But it did lead a lot of people to also say he's ducking the rematch. I never bought into that personally. For me, the reason I never bought into it is simply because he won the fight far too easily. Vladimir Klitschko couldn't lay a glove on him. There's no way, in my opinion, you're going to go all the way to Germany to chase that fight, to beg for it, to be so confident in the build-up and to win it that easily and then suddenly to be afraid of the rematch. If anything, it would have reinforced his confidence that he could deal with Vladimir Klitschko. Prior to that, he believed. After that, he knew. And so for me, it just didn't add up. But if you disagree, feel free to. That's no problem. Then came the arbitration situation with Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, and Deontay Wilder. Fury had signed to fight AJ. The arbitration ruled in favor of Wilder, and therefore we had to see the third fight. Now, some people accused Tyson Fury and Bob Arum of knowing that this was going to be the case because they claimed Bob Arum is a lawyer, so surely he must have known that there was a real potential that the case for Wilder was strong. Okay, that may very well be the case. But if that is true, then Tyson Fury messed AJ around. It's not the same thing as pulling out. He was demanded to fight this. He had to fight Deontay Wilder. You also can't have it both ways because a lot of the Brits were saying he was trying to duck Anthony Joshua. The Americans, though, who don't rate AJ the way we rate him here in the UK, they were seeing this as Fury trying to duck Deontay Wilder. Go back and look at the comments from back then. Now, whichever way you cut it, whether Fury was going to fight a prime Wilder or a prime AJ, it can't really be said that he looked for a soft touch. Now, you may feel that he felt that Deontay Wilder was the easier test because he'd beaten him so soundly in the second fight. He knows he's got his number. Why risk it against Anthony Joshua? But if then that's the case, why would you ever sign to fight AJ? Why not just agree to fight Wilder initially? Maybe you can accuse him, like I said, of messing AJ around. It's not the same thing as a pullout, and you can't really accuse him of ducking somebody if he knew that he had to legally fight Deontay Wilder. Another example is the situation that occurred with Oleksandr Usyk. When Team Usyk pulled the plug on the negotiations with Tyson Fury, they did so because they felt that Fury was not really genuine about wanting to take the fight. They were basically accusing him of not even being in camp. Sugar Hill had let the cat out of the bag in saying that he wasn't there to train Tyson Fury. He also didn't have top-level southpaw sparring in camp and so on and so forth. And for those people, I can 100% understand why they would suddenly say, you know what, typical Tyson Fury, he didn't want this fight. He was looking for an excuse. Now he's found one. I do understand the logic of that. The evidence wasn't looking good for Tyson Fury. There's no doubt about that. When they then agree to actually make the fight occur and they've signed for it, if you're now saying you believe that he orchestrated this and cut himself, you need to understand that the evidence doesn't add up in the same way. This time, he did have top-level southpaw sparring in. This time, Sugar Hill was in camp. This time, Tyson Fury looked as though he was in terrific shape. He wasn't overweight. Even if you believe that he was struggling in sparring, which may very well be a motivation for pulling out of a fight, that you're going to assume that he's going to go to this extreme extent to cut himself in a way which can cause long-term irrevocable damage to his face and affect his long-term prospects of winning fights and his long-term health potentially, just to postpone an Oleksandr Usyk fight when there would have been better ways. So in my opinion, this was a genuine cut. It's a freak accident. I'm sure many of you are going to disagree. And in my opinion, you're engaging in confirmation bias because you expected it to play out that way. And because it has, you feel like it's confirmed your position. Having said that, it's also unfair for me to just turn around and say, oh yeah, well, whatever, confirmation bias, because many of you were adamant about it. So why shouldn't you feel as though your opinions have been confirmed? I do understand that. I'm not undermining your thought process by expecting it to happen and then it happening. But I just believe if we're going to analyze each situation critically, this idea that he would purposely cut himself, it doesn't make sense to me. This idea that he's always pulled out of fights, I can't see the pattern for that. If you're going to tell me you think that he will take a big risk and then live off of the glory of that for a while and be risk averse, then take another big risk and then be risk averse again. If that's your opinion, that he is greedy and prices himself out of fights so as not to take big risks, that's a different discussion. That's a different debate to whether you're talking about him signing for a fight and then bottling it and then pulling out of the fight. That's a different thing. And for that, I can't see a pattern, let alone to the extent where you permanently damage yourself. But I'm sure many of you disagree, so let me know in the comments section down below what your position is. Now, with regards to Oleksandr Usyk, in my opinion, his team need to get a hold of the situation because now there's talk about him fighting Filip Hrgović, and it shows the mentality of this man. It shows what an incredible champion he's been. This guy, the things he's achieved, and he's done it all on the road, always taking risks. If he wins undisputed, he is catapulted into the conversation for being the best of all time. Olympic gold medalist, world amateur gold medalist, undisputed cruiserweight champion, undisputed heavyweight champion, whilst never taking a loss and all on the road against all comers, against different styles. It is unbelievable. But sometimes you need to protect the man from himself. Taking a guy like Filip Hrgović on short notice, to me, is madness. If the Saudis are willing to give Hrgović step-aside money or if they're willing to promise him riches of future fights, that's the position they need to go down. But one thing I'll say is that from a sporting perspective, I understand why Hrgović is so frustrated, but he's not exactly out there taking huge risks. His last fight, he fought Mark Demori. Go and keep yourself nice and busy and active and allow the summer showdown to take place, and then you can potentially guarantee yourself a shot at all the marbles. That's how I would look at it if I was the Saudis wanting to put Hrgović to the side for a moment to ensure that this undisputed fight goes ahead. But will Hrgović want that? Will Oleksandr Usyk himself want that? He could get unstuck. A lot also depends on the condition of Hrgović, though. If he hasn't stayed active since that Mark Demori fight, and he's let himself go a little bit, expecting to get back into shape when he's next going to be tested again, well, then he could be caught out cold and he could be going into the biggest fight of his life when he's not sharp, when he's not 100% fit. What do you think Usyk should do? What do you think Filip Hrgović should do? Let me know in the comment section down below. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.